These are DX Biorobos. Today we'll be comparing the quirks and differences of each kind to differentiate what year they came from and what box they belong to. We begin with 1984 first release DX Biorobo, followed by Godaikin release Bioman, which came out in the United States. And we end with 10th anniversary DX Biorobo, which is pretty unique because it has this gold sticker over here. And at the time, LiveMan was the 10th anniversary Super Sentai. Now we have a few questions about that. At the time, Go Ranger and Jaka was not part of the Super Sentai lineup. And this came out in 1989. That would be the tail end year for LiveMan, and the reason why we have this version of the box with the LiveMan sticker. It's pretty much easy to tell apart the Godaikin release from the Japanese first release, so let's go ahead and compare the 1984 and 1989 box. At first look, 1984 and 1989 Biorobos look identical, but they do have quirks and differences. Let's go and look at them one by one. As I mentioned earlier, the 1989 release has a reissue sticker with LiveMan over here, and that's a dead giveaway that your Biorobo is a reissue. But other than that, there are other key differences. Let's first look at the color font. On the Japanese text of the first release, we have a darker shade of blue compared to the reissue, which is a lighter shade. And it's pretty apparent if we look at it from this distance. We can also see next is the red line on the box over here. In the first release from 1984, the red stripe is significantly thicker than the reissue. And if we look closely, even the Bioman logo hits the red line on the first release. On the reissue, it does not. I mean, it goes on there, but it doesn't go over the red line. We also notice that the copyright logo is offset compared to the first release 1984. On my edition of the box, we can see that the shade of Biojet 1 and 2 are just white, outlined in pink. But in the reissue, we have both of them colored in pink. Let's go ahead and turn the box over to see what differences lie. At the back of the box, we can see a little difference. If we look over here, there is a 7-digit serial number as compared to the 8-digit serial number on the reissue. We also notice there's a Japanese text sticker over here, which is not visible on the first one. To the bottom of the box, we have 1984 on top and 1989 under. If we look closely, we can see that the fonts used for the computer number is completely different. We also have the texts over here with different fonts and styles, but pretty much they're all the same from there, considering that they use a different shade of gray for this text as opposed to the one down here. To the side of the box, we can see differences. If we look at the font of the first release, it's much wider than the font of the reissue. Also, they use a different shade of blue in the printing of the photo from the first release versus the reissue. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. Moving over to the side, it's pretty much the same story. It's the different shades of blue, just like on the other side and in the box in general. We also have a noticeable difference in the GC13 marking. It's pretty much smaller on the first issue as compared to the reissue over here. And of course, we can tell that the blues in the Bioman sign are completely different in font color, but pretty much the same in every other way. Moving to the top of the box, we have the noticeable darker shade of blue on top as compared to the reissue with a lighter shade. And if we look at the Biorobo text spec over here, we can notice that it uses a bolder font as compared to the reissue. This is much thicker than the one over here. it's much thinner than the reissue. But aside from that, everything else looks the same. Let's now compare the stamps and differences of each one to see how they're different from each other and how to tell them apart. We begin with the landing gear on the 1984 release. And we're going to go ahead and open this up. If we look closely, we can see that it's colored red and there's the number 1. That probably indicates that it's the first release. Let's move over to the second one, the Godaikin release. If we notice, we can see a number 2 upside down, and we can also tell that the plastic used here is color black as compared to the first one, which was red. Let's go ahead and compare with the 1989 release. Alright, we can see that the Japanese reissue also uses the red plastic as just like in the first one. And now we compare the timestamps on the underside of the jet. If we look at BioJet 1 from 1984 and the Godaikin release, they're pretty much identical. It's pretty hard to tell them apart. But when we move over to the reissue, in the 1989 release, it's super noticeable. We have a block stamp here, and we got this oblong over here on the stamp. And what makes it even more noticeable is the Made in Japan sticker, which was added on there. Now, through time, the sticker can fall off, but for sure, you're not going to have the Bioman logo on there because the reissue uses a completely different stamp. And we'll remember that because there's a square border around that symbol. That concludes the differences for BioJet 1. Moving on to the logo of BioJet 1. We can see that the Bioman logo is a thick set of font, which is also true for the second one. But comparing it with the third reissue, we can see that the Bioman text is much thinner, just as the box, using the same types of fonts, which is super noticeable. Let's now move over to BioJet 2 and compare the differences in stamps. For the first release, we can see Bandai Japan 1984 on the left side and GC13 on the right side. And there's pretty much nothing special about them. They all look like plain text. But going over to the Godaikin release, everything else looks the same, except if you look closely in the Japan logo, you're going to see that they put an oblong on that stamping, making it unique and different from the first release. Let's move over to the 1989 release, and if we look closely, the signs are completely different. We now have TV Asahi Toei Bandai 1984. We got a unique Made in Japan sticker, which can fall off, but a dead giveaway would be the TV Asahi logo over here. And we still have the Bioman GC13, but that's completely different in form of text and fonts, completely different from the first release. And finally, let's go ahead and compare the differences in robot mode. Let's begin by looking at BioJet 1's head from 1984. As we can see, the paint is perfectly set. There are no oversprays. Everything is nice and clear. Everything is lined up properly. The same can be said with the Godaikin release. Pretty much consistent, nice quality control. But sadly, when we go over to the head of the 1989 release, we can see a lot of overspray on the black, which is noticeable on this side. Same can be said on the other side. And if we look at the panel lining, it's not exactly perfect, and it's lined up as shown in the Godaikin and the 1984 release. Let's move on over to the knees, and the paint here is perfect. There's no difference. Also fine and dandy on the Godaikin release, but let's go ahead and look at the quality of the 1989 release, and we can see a lack of quality in the paint. We can see a lot of overspray on the reds, on the bends of this robot, and that's just pretty sad. But other than that, Whatever Biorobo you choose, they're all pretty much good. If you ask me, I like the first release the best. If you like this video, please subscribe to my page, Toku Traveler. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.